Nancy Margaret Williams. Yes. As far as I'm concerned, and with my knowledge, now I have not been out in the workplace for probably 15 years, maybe 20, but I think it probably still exists. It always existed for me, and I started working I graduated from high school in 1941. I was in college and I graduated then in 1945, and I was paid, well, number one was to get a job other than being a clerk or a secretary, or I've never done factory work or anything, but that's a different area, I don't know. But for me, definitely wanted to get a job that was not secondary to somebody, or third or fourth or fifth. And then secondly, even if you got the number two, to get an equal pay to a man who would have had that number two job. So I could get the job to do the work. But I got paid less than the man who would have had the job also. Primarily, I was interested in being a magazine editor. And at that time, there was not much that was published in terms of a national magazine. They had correspondence. Most of that was in New York. And this area had not become important enough, it sounds strange, to provide its own basic source for a major magazine. So I wanted to be a correspondent and get messages from New York, check up and see what's happening in Southern California about this or that or the other thing. I got a little bit of that, but it took me some years to get into a place where I could be the magazine or house organ published by an individual company, where I would be hired as an editor and able to produce the whole thing. Yes, but that didn't last very long. I would not be talked to that way. Except everybody has a boss. So there's the boss-employee relationship. I have to say this in favor of the men. I was never treated less than politely. I never had to put up with bad language, with a lot of this sort of thing, or demeaning positions. Partly that was a two-way street. I wouldn't accept it. And then secondly, the post-war generation, now I'm talking post-World War II, which I represent, and the guys who were coming home from the war. Now, I don't know if you know this, but every available man who could walk was involved in the war. So post-war, it was an opportunity for men and women to really change relationships, because women had had different and responsible jobs because the men were in the service, and young guys like you had been overseas. You may never have been out of southeast Kansas in your life. All of us, there you were, responsible for managing traffic in Paris, maybe, or climbing the mountains in Italy, or learning how to swim out to your boat on Terrible Island in the Pacific. It was a very unique time for people of my generation, both men and women. only at the risk of their lives. I just did not accept that. Now, that doesn't mean that there were not comments made that I didn't hear or wasn't in the room for or something. But basically, as far as I'm concerned, I set my own standards for behavior and for being behaved to. And one of the reasons I ended up in an architectural engineering firm or firms is because the people who do that kind of work are usually college trained, and they come with a certain basic manner anyhow. They don't go into that field. They don't go to college very often, so they don't learn ways to promote that. Pay. That was number one. And I don't think I ever, in an entire 40 some odd years that I worked, I ever was equally paid. Whether I was doing it on a per job basis, or as an employee, or as a consultant, and I've had all of those roles. Never the going rate for men. Well, this is personally just me. I was handicapped because I grew up in a family where women were not expected to be argumentative about things like money. It was unladylike. Now, that may seem like a very strange bringing up, but it was not that unusual for someone in the middle to sort of slightly upper middle, only slightly upper. It just was not part of good manners for women to fight about money. In my experience, what went on with everybody else, I don't know. If you put it on the co-worker basis, not a great deal. And I think that's partly because, again, architects, engineers have had a professional training themselves. So there's very few that come up with that, you're a servant and do what I say kind of thing. They treated me partly because I demanded respect. It takes two to change that sort of thing. Well, at the risk of being shut out of the room that we were in, or the risk of being yelled at, or the risk of having something thrown at, oppose it. However you can be effective, if you have to resort to legal activity, fine. If you have to rely on yourself as an individual, see to it that you are treated the way that is you consider equal. That means confronting it, and confronting it depends to some extent on the style of the company that you're in, where you've experienced it, or with an outside group that can come to your aid, or really put yourself on the line by seeing to it that you get into a position that you can meet with the people that will make a difference. I think independence is wonderful, but equal pay should go along with it.
Yeah.
And I never got that.
Okay. All right.
That was one thing that I feel I didn't fail at it so much, because for me, as I said, my whole social background was ladies do not argue about money. It's impolite. And that is all well and good in polite society. But where it comes to supporting yourself or making it possible for you to have jobs that give you greater growth opportunities, ladyhood can take one or two steps back. You never give it up completely, because that's what you are and you need to be accepted. Now, I was always grateful for the fact that even though I was complaining, I never had to give up basic good manners. I was always treated that way. That may not be true for everybody, because I was working with a group of people that were college graduates, generally, that had at least a modicum of similar background in my head. And if they didn't, I saw to it that I was treated appropriately. Now, I'd like to think that the current effect of the changes that my generation has made has left its mark in being standard procedure now, that you don't suffer the potential things that we had. You're not all expected to sit at a typewriter or take messages and say, "Sir, yes, sir." I think that's changed. And I don't know, I think even this has probably changed. Women bosses were also something rare, relatively. And being a woman employee, I mean, if you were a boss who was a woman, it's a different way, I felt, to treat as, what's the word I want? To treat an employee who reported to me. I felt I had to treat that differently than it would have been if it had been a man. Now, whether that has changed or not, I have no way of knowing. But I think probably women have come along sufficiently in the boss supervisor status that it's not probably that difficult as it might have been, a woman to woman.